saying, look, we've got tremendous challenges, COVID, the economy, racial injustice, climate change, but there's nothing we can't do if we come together. And there's one other thing he said that I think, especially us in the media, must know. He said that there is truth and there are lies. Lies that are told for power and lies that are told for profit. And I think that it was a call to all of us, whether it's us on the air, on cable or broadcast, whether it's us on social media, on our Twitter accounts, understanding that we have to deal from facts, from the truth, to hear each other out, as he said, a right to disagree, but not a right to violence. This is the easy part, as has been suggested. Now he's got to turn words, rhetoric into reality and action, but I thought it was a great start.
Katie Pavlich, Ronald Reagan in his first inaugural took the tone of renewal. He said government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. This speech dealt with unity and talked about the way forward, bringing the country together. It didn't talk, obviously, a lot about specifics. And obviously, this philosophy of this administration is going to be reliant on government to do a lot of things.
That is true, Brett. I think that Joe Biden has a very different political philosophy when it comes to the role of the federal government in particular compared to Republican President Ronald Reagan. And yes, we have just watched what President Joe Biden had to say to the country about unity. We're going to see more of the specifics about what he plans to do this afternoon when he signs a series of executive orders and starts sending real legislation to Capitol Hill. But it's very difficult to reconcile unity with very deep disagreements when it comes to policies and how to move the country forward. We know that Joe Biden has a very split Senate, 50-50. It's very reflective of where the country is right now. Nancy Pelosi has a very slim majority in the House. And when it comes to this unity question, there's talk about getting along with Republicans, of course. But I really wonder how Joe Biden speaks to the left of his party. Over the last 2 months, we have seen people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has a formidable seat in the power of the left and the Democratic side now, calling for people from the Trump administration to be put on lists. You have just this week, a Democrat congressman coming out and questioning the loyalty of National Guard members based on who they voted for in the last presidential election. And so, there are questions about whether the left, who thinks, look, Joe Biden won the White House, they got behind him to get him there, they have the Senate control, House control in Washington, maybe they don't want as much unity as Joe Biden is calling for with everybody else inside the country, and they feel like they want to move forward with a very progressive agenda. So Joe Biden's words today will have to be reconciled with what he does as he starts to govern.
Yeah, Katie, you make a great point. The country voted for an almost divided government. We saw big gains in Republican seats in the course of the last election. A lot of people, it turns out, went in there and split their votes in order to give us the situation that we're in right now, which makes it very difficult to do big sweeping changes. I want to bring Karl Rove back in here. Karl, he talked about being a president to all Americans, but one question is, how will he fight for, he says he will fight for everyone. How will he fight for the 74 million people who did not vote for him?
Well, you put your finger on it. I mean, elections are about choices, and look, for the moment, this was a great speech. For the moment, it was authentically Joe Biden. It was a common man touch. We even got the word "folks" in there. He talked about his dad sleepless at nights, worried about his family. It was a heartfelt appeal for unity. And I thought it was well delivered. And it was him. The sense we can overcome as a nation big challenges, a belief in America and America's essential goodness, a call for boldness. I thought all of that was good. It won't have the memorable lines of Lincoln's second inaugural or FDR's 33 inaugural or JFK 61 or Reagan 81. But it was, for the moment, exactly what I think the American people needed to hear. I have one small quibble with it, and it has to do with the question you asked. He talked about the forces dividing America and said what was dividing us as a country was the difference between the American ideal and racism, nativism, and fear. Well, I think opposition to racism, nativism, and fear is what unites Americans. I don't think this is a question of some of us believe in the American ideal, and 74, the implication was 74 million people believed in racism, nativism, and fear. I don't think that's the division. It was the only quibble I'd have with the speech. But it is, as Ben Dominic said earlier, with an old tired cliche, but absolutely accurate, the proof is going to be in the pudding. What does he do to try and find common ground? I worked for a guy whose first initiative involved 2 Republicans, John Boehner of the House of Representatives, Judd Gregg of New Hampshire, Republican Senator, and Ted Kennedy, Democrat of Massachusetts, and George Miller, Democrat of California, working together on education reform. Where is going to be the similar opening initiative of Joe Biden? We don't know yet, but I agree with Katie. 15 executive orders this afternoon are not going to be moments of unity. They're going to be moments of, in essence, fulfillment for in most instances, the left of his party.
Turning the page, according to the Biden administration, as you look live there in front of the Capitol, Lady Gaga speaking to former First Lady Michelle Obama. And you saw the former president there, of course, now the former vice president, Mike Pence, representing the Trump administration with his wife, Karen. We should point out this afternoon, Presidents Biden, Obama, Bush, and Clinton will participate in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, Arlington National Cemetery, later on this afternoon, once they stop the selfies on the front of the Capitol. Dana, your thoughts on this day, what Carl just said, and the challenges ahead?
Well, we just got the first tweet from the new president under his presidential account, and it said, "There's no time to wait when it comes to tackling the crises we face. That's why today I'm heading to the Oval Office to get right to work, delivering bold action and immediate relief for American families." Well, no exclamation points or any sort of flair in that first tweet. So there's going to be something interesting to watch here. How do you take the rhetoric and the desires of Joe Biden and figure out a way to navigate that? They're talking about unity, and when we think about that, I think that it's when people feel like everyday Americans are at each other's throats because of ideological differences. But there is a lack of unity within the Democratic Party and within the Republican Party. You have people that have left the Republican Party, left the Democratic Party. This is like new ground and a 50-50 Senate. And we know that he says he's going to tackle COVID first. That's one of his first things he's got to do. But we also know that every president deals with something they weren't anticipating. So can they get the personnel in there confirmed, be surrounded by a team that can help this country move forward very quickly? I hate goodbyes and I hate laughs. And I love hellos and firsts. I cry at all of them. And the inauguration of every inauguration seems to be full of those. I'm glad they're having an enjoyable time now, but they know that a couple hours when they walk into the White House, it all gets very real.
So true, Dana. Let's bring in Britt Hume. Britt, we've heard so much about how this will be a calmer, even the word boring has been used, presidency, but no president knows what lies before him, and we've seen so many unexpected twists and turns recently. This is an enormous mantle of responsibility that has now been laying on Joe Biden's shoulders.
Well, it certainly is, but I think that, Martha, that to the extent that this speech could do it, he did sound unifying notes. He laid off a lot of partisan stuff. I mean, I agree with Carl Rowe with some of the things he said about the situation we're in and why and so on, and the divisions in the country. But I think this speech will be very well received. And I would point out a couple of things. The president, did talk about what a crisis we're in. We got crisis in the environment. We got the COVID crisis and all the rest of that. I think, however, for all the talk about that, and the media are full of this talk, that the situation is one more friendly to Biden than he might have imagined. For example, COVID. Everybody wants to say that the COVID crisis is getting worse, and certainly the numbers suggest that. But we have a vaccine, and we believe and have every reason to believe it works. There's some serious distribution issues that I suspect will be fairly quickly resolved. And that is what we've hoped for from the beginning, that there would be a vaccine. We never thought we'd have one as soon as now. And we thought it'd be way into next year, maybe beyond, before we've got one. So that's one big problem that is well on the way to solution that he faces. And look around the world, we've seen some kind of baby steps, but important ones toward a new way.
Really? 100,000 people die?
All right, we're losing his audio there just a bit.
It may happen again.
Thank you, Brett. You're breaking up a little bit. President Obama making his way around the dais here. I just want to point out that, President Trump talked about that this morning, the former president, about, oh, the economy's going to take off and the vaccines are going to get around. And he said, when they do, remember us. Right.
That's right. Let's listen in for a second, see what we get. Presidents will have a reclaim later, but now the president, 46th president, and his wife, the First Lady, Jill Biden, will head to the other side of the Capitol for a pass and review, which is a military tradition. Will review the readiness of military troops. Eventually, they'll make their way to Arlington, as I mentioned, and then there will be a parade. It'll just be virtual. We should point out that who's the escort there is Officer Goodman. He was the officer who protected the Capitol, taking some of the mob the other way from where senators were January 6th. And he's right there in the tan coat, kind of walking down the stairs. They honored him with a new position, as you watch former Vice President Mike Pence, and Goodman has a big role today. Juan, the rest of this day is very different, and the fact that we just have to note not only the masks, but the fact that there were flags and not people in the National Mall, and the fact that this is so different in the middle of a pandemic, let alone a pandemic 2 weeks after a mob broke into the Capitol. This, obviously, Vice President Pence and the new Vice President Kamala Harris and the second gentleman.
I appreciate that picture because it's, again, a significant moment in terms of the transfer of power and having it done in a civil, peaceful manner, respectful manner there on the east steps of the Capitol. Obviously, President Trump chose not to be there, but Vice President Pence and his wife did. And again, they had communicated. It took a while for Vice President Pence or the former Vice President to communicate with the new Vice President, but he did. There was no communication between President Trump and the new president, Joe Biden. What struck me, and I appreciated Joe Biden's speech, I don't think it was full of rhetorical flourish, but I thought it was, again, authentic. He just felt like he was speaking to you very genuinely. Reminded, historically, 1920, Warren G. Harding, after the wars and the Spanish flu, he talked about a return to normalcy. And I just had the sense that you hear this authentic voice talking about, we can come together. There can be healing. He specifically said, thank you to all my predecessors of both parties who chose to be here today. And again, I think he did that because it fit with his theme of unity, of coming together, of healing. And when he spoke of restoring the soul, the silent prayer, when he talked about my whole soul is in it, he goes back to Abe Lincoln signing the Emancipation Proclamation. And I just think it has such power because Republicans and Democrats admire Lincoln.
I just want to take this moment, as Mike Pence took one look back at the United States Capitol where he has spent many years. This is normally a moment where you have the former president and the former vice president and the new president and the former vice president. This has come down to these four people as we watch Vice President Harris and the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, wave goodbye to Mike Pence. This has been a very tumultuous few weeks for Mike Pence. Think about what he went through at the Capitol. Think about the dissolution of his close relationship with President Trump, who he stood by throughout the entire course of the first 4 years during good times and bad times. But Mike Pence goes back to Indiana to think about what comes next for him. No doubt he would consider a run for president. Most vice presidents usually have that in their forward-looking window as he departs the Capitol Hill area today, Brett.
It's amazing, if you think about it, how much January 6th changed the world.
Yeah.
Changed the world here in Washington, changed the political world, and what a shot there with the new vice president and the second gentleman. But changed the perspective, and you point out that relationship between Vice President Pence and President Trump fell apart on that day and the days after. And it's just a different place now as far as the way forward with and the GOP, the way forward as well. Let's turn to Peter Doocy quickly at the White House for the first orders that will be signed by President Biden. Peter?
And we know that there are cleaning crews and resident staff going through the White House, making sure that everything is ready for the Bidens when they arrive, which is not going to be right away. They have a few more stops before they get here, but one of his first stops on property is going to be the Oval Office, where they're telling us that he's going to sign executive orders today that would stop border wall construction. It would reverse that travel ban on people coming into the country from majority Muslim countries. He would rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, which President Trump left a few years ago with a different order because he thought the terms were unfair to the United States. He would mandate mask wearing on all federal property, and he would extend a pause on student loan payments. And then throughout the next couple of days, throughout the first 10 days, he also plans to order a federal expansion of COVID testing, expand access to health care for women, and order that families that have been separated and detained at the border are reunited. The Biden team is trying to, in just a few minutes, undo things that generated hours, weeks and months, and in some cases years of debate and controversy with the last president. Brett?
All right, Peter Doocy, live on the North Lawn, his new home now as White House correspondent. Peter, thank you.
Congratulations, Peter. We're going to be seeing a lot of him over the course of the next 4 years. We're going to sneak in a very quick break here during this pause, and we will be back with much more of our coverage of the inauguration of Joseph R. Biden after this.
I'll take a look. You know you want to.
Money, low. Catch that girl by her dog. This is awesome.
Why is that? Why?
Why not?
Why ain't that?
The Little Things, rated R, in theaters and streaming exclusively on HBO Max.
The Rocket Mortgage Super Bowl Squares sweepstakes is back. Every time the score changes, someone will win $50,000. Touchdowns, field goals, extra points, 50 G's. Plus, $2.5 million prizes. Put them toward a dream home. One way to enter, two ways to win. Squares is back. Sign up for free at RocketMortgageSquares.com. Rocket Mortgage, official mortgage sponsor of Super Bowl 55.
My family and I and the Indianapolis Colts have talked about what causes we really want to get behind. And one very important cause
Mute ko, kaya i-mute ko. Paano ba mag-mute?
about is mental health
Paano ba mag-mute?
I struggled for a long time, and then I had to go to counseling, and it's
Kainis.
okay to not be okay.
Mute,
No,
mute,
this
mute.
thing we're
Nasaan
going
ba ang
through, life
mute?
is not perfect. And there's so many times where, you're going to face so many obstacles, and you're going to feel like the
Ano ba
world is
yan?
against
Hindi ko
you. But you gotta keep
ma-mute.
fighting. You got to keep fighting no matter what, and just don't ever give up.
Kicking the stigma is our
Inis
commitment
ako.
to eradicating and getting this
Gusto ko siya
environment
i-mute.
changed.
Ano kaloka? Paano ba? TV na lang i-mute ko.
At Empower Retirement, we help you open doors to get you ready for everything that lies ahead. Because your financial wellness is what matters most. Behind every door is an opportunity to save for life's moments.
Kaloka. Oh my God. Pinagagawa ko. Uy. Ba yan? Ano ba yan? Ano ba yan? Ang hirap lang nasa cellphone. Hindi ko maibalik tuloy. Ayan. Ayan, balik na. Naka-commercial eh. O, diyan ka na lang muna. At ako'y naglilinis. kasama ang labas. Ganda-ganda ng araw sa labas, parang walang ano, parang hindi malamig. Ay nako, nagda-dusting ako. Yes. Yes. Tutok ya kayo mga angel ko. Diba? Lagyan ko uli ng volume, nakauna siya ulit.
All the right things about unity, but it's hard not to notice that as he says this, there are lots of other people in his party. You know, the interview with Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi, where they're throwing out words like traitor, white supremacist, so forth. As long as that language is out there, I think it's going to be very, very hard to achieve that unity. I'm glad Joe Biden didn't indulge it, but at some point, to be serious about these words, I think he's going to have to take it on.
Harold Ford Jr., your thoughts on what Bill just said and that challenge about reaching out to the 74 million who voted for Donald Trump?
You know, I listened to the speech, and I never heard him say I was only speaking to Democrats now, and I want the Republicans to listen now. He said we're going to be judged by how we rise to this occasion. He didn't say we Democrats or we Republicans. He quoted, and all the things that have been said about the speech, I think a lot of this here, but he said that every disagreement had to turn into total war. He didn't say every disagreement Democrat or every disagreement Republicans. He spoke to us all. I think the speech will be remembered for what Bill just said. If we succeed getting broader vaccine distribution, if we succeed in helping Main Street to be revived, otherwise it won't be remembered. And the true test of his presidency will be if he gives meaning and purpose and life to the words which call for his sole thing on many as you said, right? In finding ways not just to unite the country, but to unite the country by doing something for the very people who make up this government. I thought it was a fantastic speech. It could not have been more authentic for the moment as has been said over and over again. If he is right, Joe Biden, he will be judged. This Congress, the entire political class will be judged by how we all rise to this very extraordinary occasion that is 2021.
Yeah, Harold, but what about the looming impeachment of President Trump and how that fits into the equation of unity and moving on and getting the agenda that President Biden wants to put forward? Where does that fall? And does Biden suddenly come in and say, you know what, maybe we shouldn't do this?
We'll have to wait and see. I think today's words, the fact that that word was not mentioned at all today, not by the president, and I think it's unfair to assign things that people in the Democratic Party or even the Republican Party or the political class in general may be saying to Joe Biden. Joe Biden has not endorsed this effort to impeach President Trump. I thought it was great that President Trump's name was not raised today. This is a new day, a new dawn, and we'll have to wait and see around that. But I'm not convinced. I do think what Leader McConnell did, I'm not convinced what will happen. I do think what Leader McConnell did in the last 36 hours, and saying that what happened 2 weeks ago, that mob was inspired by President Trump. Even those points were not echoed by President Biden now. So it's my hope that we find ways to move on, we find ways to tell the truth, and we find ways to be judged the way President Biden said, but how we rise to the moment, how we rise to this extraordinary occasion.
Thank you, Harold. Dana, I can't help but think when I look at the business at hand for these executive orders in the Oval Office that none of that can happen if we don't get through this COVID pandemic. I mean, we talked about the importance of January 6th. This whole year would be different without COVID. I remember when we covered the State of the Union address asking the president in the lunch beforehand, what do you think about this virus from China and all that it has wrought? I mean, I'd love to see the new president say, today, this afternoon, we're focusing on the 100 million vaccines that have to happen in the first 100 days. That's my number one priority. Your thoughts?
I think, well, because if we don't get that under control, nothing can get back to normal. There will not be unity. Nothing works after that. But I think to what Britt Hume said, we have the promise of the vaccine and the therapies. There is light at the end of the tunnel. This is a really tough period for America right now. But I think today what we show, and it might just be for a day, there will be arguments in the future and debates in the future. Big policy decisions are coming. The tone and everything is going to be scrutinized. But as my husband, who is British born but an American citizen, you look at what happened today. America does this kind of thing very, very well.
There was a bumpy road to get to today, but we are here, and it was a peaceful transfer of power. No incidents that we've heard of in Washington, D.C., and that's a good thing.
Something to be grateful for, absolutely, for our nation. A gorgeous day as we have watched all of this play out here in Washington, D.C.
That's it for us for now from Washington. You saw it live. Joe Biden sworn in just an hour ago as the 46th President of the United States.
Lots of events to follow. We'll be back again at 3 o'clock Eastern for more coverage of this historic day, including a virtual parade.
Senator Smith, John Roberts here in Washington. Take over now.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Martha. We'll take it from here. Joe Biden is now officially the 46th President of the United States, an inauguration day that looks unlike any other in American history. A beautiful moment indeed. John Roberts, as we went through this day on Capitol Hill and beyond, America is watching a remarkable day in this country's history. Hello, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith. And what a day, John.
Yeah, good afternoon to you. I'm John Roberts. As we watch Joe Biden, the president, 46th president of the United States, get into that SUV for what will be a short parade. Typically, what we do is we have a long parade here that goes down Constitution Avenue and then turns up Pennsylvania Avenue and comes in front of the White House. The president traditionally will get out of the limousine to a reviewing stand and then spend about the next 3 or 4 hours there as every marching band from every military branch and every high school across America goes by in front of that reviewing stand. There you see Hillary Clinton, the former President Bill Clinton coming out front there. But that will not happen this year. They had the reviewing stand set up, and then they took it back down when it became clear the coronavirus was not going to allow that parade to transpire. You know, Sandra, I spent 2 years during inaugurations on the flatbed truck that was leading the procession of that parade, and it really is quite amazing as we see former President Obama and Michelle Obama come out from the east front of the Capitol. It really is extraordinary to have that perspective as the new president makes his way up Pennsylvania Avenue with throngs of cheering crowds, none of which is going to happen this year.
Chief Justice John Roberts swearing in the president earlier. Justice Sotomayor swearing in Kamala Harris. A remarkable day indeed as we watch many of the former presidents and former first ladies depart there. After the momentous occasion, President Biden delivered his inaugural address. It will be talked about for years, decades to come, John. And all of this is happening against the backdrop of this heavily guarded Capitol. I know, John, I had a chance to talk to you a few moments ago. I mean, a Capitol like you've never seen, Washington, D.C. like you've never seen it before. Just an intense amount of security across our nation's capital as this goes on.
I mean, it really is quite extraordinary when you consider just how broad the security cordon is here. Again, in inaugurations past, and I was at 5 previous to this one, you obviously had a security cordon that circled the mall, and you had points of entry for the tens of thousands of people who would come in to observe the inauguration so that they would go through there and be checked for any prohibited items. But there would be throngs of people on the National Mall. But now there's no one really on the National Mall, save for a few people. There are thousands of flags, which actually but the security cordon would only be for a couple of blocks around the National Mall. But this year, the security cordon goes back probably almost 2/3 of a mile, I would think, from the National Mall and all the way out to the Potomac River, and then for some blocks behind the Capitol as well. I've never seen this level of security involving the National Guard, and there's 25,000 members of the National Guard as well, and then the size of the security cordon as well. But you know what? I can tell you one thing. There's hardly anybody in Washington, D.C. out in the streets today. So all of the unrest that was feared that might take place on this day seems to have thankfully not appeared, which is a good thing. I mean, it does look a little bit like an armed camp as opposed to an inauguration, but so far things have been extraordinarily peaceful.
And as we watch them depart, just a heads up of what we're about to see at top of the hour, President Biden and Vice President Harris will be joined by Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama. There will be an event at Arlington National Cemetery. So, of course, top of the hour, we will have that for our audience as well, John.
And you know, Sandra, one thing that we've been talking about is that when Joe Biden goes to the White House for the first time as President of the United States, obviously he's been there many times as the Vice President of the United States. He'll go first of all to the Oval Office, like many presidents do. And the first thing that presidents do, and this goes all the way back to Ronald Reagan, is they sit behind the desk and they take a moment just to let the weight of the office settle in on them. You know, you've got the campaign, you've got election night, you've got the transition, you've got the inauguration, but once you get behind that desk, and more times than not, it's the resolute desk, then the weight of the office settles in on you, and then you open up the desk and you find the letter that the previous president has left for you. We do know that President Trump left one for President Biden. We don't know what it says, but just as an example, here's what President Bush wrote to President Obama in 2009. He said that there would be trying moments, that his critics would rage, that his friends would disappoint, but that he will have an almighty God to comfort you, a family who loves you, in a country that is pulling for you.